The oracle ceremony is the so-called ritual of adulthood, during which men and women who have reached the age of 15 are given the appropriate skills. Each person waits for this crucial moment and hopes to get the best skill. Young Hector Glenrid was also approaching such an important moment in the capital of the Kingdom of Falsford. His father, heading with Hector to the ceremony, reminded him that their aristocratic Glenrid family had a long tradition of producing attribute mages from generation to generation. Hector had heard the story many times and only looked wistfully out of the carriage at the places they passed. Hector promised his father, a very stern and serious man, not to disappoint his expectations and try to get the best skill. Margrave Rand Glenrid owned the southernmost part of the Kingdom of Falsford and was accustomed to getting his way, so he demanded it of his son as well. In fact, there was a wide range of very different magical skills, such as healing, talent of trade, or improving physical abilities. Among other things, children of aristocrats have their own specific preferences for obtaining skills and attributes. It is important for aristocrats to obtain skills in the range of the 3 elements of fire, water, and wind, as these magical attributes are most effective in combat situations. It was almost impossible to obtain such skills simply by one's own strength, but Hector still very much wanted to become a mage of one of these powerful elements and truly believed in the noble blood of his Glenrid family. Soon the decisive moment of the oracle ceremony arrived, and the chief magister announced that Hector had acquired a very specific attribute. The heir to the Glenrid family was eagerly awaiting the result, but the magister procrastinated. In the end, the magister declared that Hector had acquired the attribute of land. Rand Glenrid was truly furious at this and demanded that his son's attribute be redone. But the magister reminded the Margrave that repeating the procedure would in no way change the outcome and everything was already predetermined. The grieved father could not accept such a result, for his family had always been famous for the fact that their children always possessed the 3 main attributes of the elements. And Hector was the 3rd son of the Glenrid family and was a loser. Hector tried to calm his father down, but was immediately hit in the face. Margrave Rand roared that he would not allow Hector to sully their ancient family. The young lad felt both physical pain and moral offense, and his father continued to insult and accuse his own son. The eldest son of the Glenrid family, Beld, explained that even if Hector learned to manipulate earth and stones well, the amount of magical energy consumed made this attribute extremely inefficient, and thus Hector would be completely useless in actual combat. The second son of the family, Glenrid, was in complete agreement with his older brother and stated that it was no wonder why his father was so angry since Hector had acquired one of the worst attributes. The brothers immediately began to deprecate Hector and said that one could not such a disgrace ruin the family's reputation. Hector could only wait for his punishment to be determined by his father. In the meantime, Hector was forbidden even to eat at the same table with the rest of the family. The situation in which Hector found himself was terrible, and he did not understand why everyone hated him so sharply, avoided him, and constantly said that he smelled of earth. Hector was depressed by his situation, for he dreamed of receiving the attribute of wind. Soon he was placed under house arrest by order of his father, and so lasted half a year. And at the end of his house arrest, his father made the decision to banish Hector from his family forever. His father appointed Hector as ruler of the village of Boda in the western part of his vast territory. At the same time, Margrave Rand forbade his youngest son to be called a member of his family and forbade him to ever return to his ancestral home. Hector was to serve his father as a mere freeman and no more. Hector found out that the village of Boda is located in a barren territory with vast undeveloped forests. Also, these lands are inhabited by many powerful monsters, many of which are very dangerous. Hector realized that his father had purposely banished him to such a wilderness so that he would never return, and best of all, perish. After all, the aristocrats didn't want to just kill him as it was against their status. Hector decided that now he would have to learn to survive relying only on himself. Accompanying Hector were the leader of the attacking wings, Squad Amanda, and the earth mage half-dwarf Orem. The swordswoman resented such an appointment and was unhappy to be traveling so far. But Orem reminded of the generous reward, because only the coachman and bodyguard were given 10,000 gold coins. The escort team also included the archer half-elf Sepher, who was not at all bothered about the assignment. Complementing the team was the tank girl half-giant Nora. This group of adventurers was quite strong, and all of its members possessed B rank. The fire sorceress Doreen was in charge of magic in the team. It was strange that this team was promised a very generous reward of 10,000 gold, while a normal person could live for a month on 2 coins. Hector received a whole bunch of gold coins from his father, and it surprised the boy, because even despite his hatred, the Margrave showed generosity. At the same time, Hector was able to keep part of his secret savings, and also received donations from his brothers. So there was no problem with money. Hector was already tired of sitting in the stuffy carriage, and asked Amanda how much longer they had to travel to their destination. But Amanda reminded him that you can't talk to her so casually, because she is practical not to talk to men without decent abilities. Hector thought that apparently he would be constantly reminded of that. Aurum proved to be much simpler and informed him that they would have to get to Boda village for about half a month more. Amanda immediately reminded the half-dwarf not to dare speak to the man they were accompanying without permission. Aurum explained to Hector that Amanda was too rude, and she needed to learn how to socialize with people. Suddenly, Nora noticed something strange up ahead and alerted the entire team. As it turned out, ahead was a gang of robbers who had already managed to rob someone. Amanda realized that at this distance they would soon be spotted and ordered her team to attack ahead. At the same time, Amanda ordered Hector to stay out of the carriage while they were busy doing their real job, which was what they were paid to do. But Hector headed after the adventurers and declared that he had an idea. Amanda replied that the Earth Mage could not help in this situation and ordered Hector to return to the carriage immediately. Hector explained that with his bloodline he had a large amount of magical power, and he wanted to prove that even with the Earth attribute he was capable of something. Amanda bellowed that Hector can do whatever he wants and she doesn't care, but she doesn't want to be responsible. The guy promised that he was willing to take all responsibility. Hector remembered when he was 10 years old. He came down with a high fever for an unknown reason. At that moment, he remembered his previous life as a Japanese from the 21st century. Hector decided that for the sake of that moment, he had spent the last 6 months practicing his magical power. During that time, he had managed to develop several effective ways to use earth magic that the people of this world would never know about. The only thing left to do was to test these skills on the bandits. The local bandits were not frightened and were not going to run away at the sight of the adventurers. On the contrary, they quickly organized themselves and decided to attack. Hector decided that the moment. A colossal magical energy surge created an earth mesh that easily scattered the first group of bandits apart. After the first success, Hector applied the earth mesh displacement and continued the attack. The earth cracked rapidly and the rifts approached the bandits' riders, terrifying both the horses and the bandits themselves. The horses could not stand and threw the riders off. Noticed for the enemy's interference, the adventurer Amanda her squad to immediately attack the bandits. Amanda was the first of all to rush forward, of course, and with her huge sword quickly defeated several bandits. The super strong half-giant girl Nora broke through the defenses with her powerful shield blows and left no chance for the stunned bandits. Hector watched the battle with admiration and was glad to have such skillful adventurers with him, for even little Aurum was not left out and bravely attacked the enemies. The half-elf Sepher sent 3 arrows at once in one shot, which hit the target accurately and drastically reduced the number of brigands. The strength of the rank B team was truly astonishing. The fire magic sorceress Doreen used fireballs to incinerate everyone she could see, leaving no chance of escape. While the battle was still going on, Hector was able to use his magical abilities to capture a few prisoners, with Aurum happily reporting that the others had scattered and the gang was neutralized. The captured brigands begged not to be killed and spared, so frightened were they by the strength of the adventurers. The half-dwarf Aurum suggested to leave the captives tied up, and when night falls, monsters will appear and eat them alive, so it will be a good punishment for such scoundrels. The bandits shouted that they did not want to become fodder for demonic beasts and asked for mercy. Hector didn't want to interfere with the adventurers' decision and replied that there was nothing he could do here. The adventurer Amanda admitted that Hector showed amazing magical abilities and helped the whole team a lot. So from now on, he is an honorary friend of their group. Such recognition surprised and inspired the exiled son of an aristocrat. Hector thanked Amanda and thought that he was only mentally visualizing what he wanted to do, and his body was manifesting magical abilities by itself. Even so, it was very gratifying to have such illustrious adventurers recognize his abilities. Nora meanwhile found some people inside the wrecked wagons and reported it to Amanda. Among the survivors of the brigands' attack was an albedo merchant who explained that he was doing business in the grand capital. Hector was pleased with the survivors and informed them that he and his entourage were on their way to Bodo's village. This quite surprised the merchant, but albedo did not comment on the young gentleman's strange itinerary. Meanwhile, Orem noticed that the merchant's wagon was unlikely to get anywhere. Albedo recognized his bad situation and decided to figure out how to get the valuable luggage to its destination. Albedo was quick to be resourceful and asked for a favor in getting him and his luggage to the nearest town, with the merchant mentioning that of course he would be willing to pay for it. Hector agreed to help the stranded merchant and thus diversify his journey. The Earth Mage suggested that Amanda take the bandits with her as well. Well, after all, there is a reward for them. The leader of the adventurous team liked the idea. But suddenly they found another rescued passenger. The girl Rin had been hiding in the wagon and now came out when she realized it was safe. Albedo explained that Rin was his assistant slave maid and asked him to take her with him. The girl seemed very beautiful to all the adventurers, and Hector, of course, could not leave Rin alone in the forest. Hector introduced himself and said that he was pleased to meet Rin. At the same time, the noble young man politely removed a stuck feather from the slave girl's hair, which made the girl worried. But the slave girl was sharply frightened and hid behind her master's back, thus upsetting Hector, for he wanted to have a little talk with the nice girl. The wagon rolled down the bumpy road and Albedo asked Hector why he was traveling so far, for if he remembered correctly, the village of Bodo was in a remote area near the western border. Hector was not going to be too frank with the unfamiliar merchant and merely replied that it was an order from Margrave Glenrid. Hector declared that he was honored to become the lord of the village of Boda. At such words, Albedo could not contain his laughter and called the young man a promising lord. The merchant said that there were rumors that there were dragons in those lands in addition to magical beasts. This was the first time Hector had heard of dragons, and he was very surprised, because it must be dangerous. Hector admitted that dragons were impressive creatures that he had only read about in fairy tales. And so the possible presence of dragons on his land worried his male curiosity greatly. Albedo was surprised at such a positive attitude of the young gentleman and was only happy for Hector. The merchant immediately liked the young man and asked if Hector would mind if he visited the village of Boda once every 3 months. After all, if the lord would be. Hector, it would mean that one would feel safe. Hector was surprised at this desire of Albedo and asked if he was really willing to travel so far for the sake of companionship. The merchant confirmed his desire. Hector thought that this friendship would be a good start to his story. Soon Hector's carriage carried the merchant and his maid Rin to the nearest town, and while the adventurers were busy delivering the captured brigands, Hector and Albedo continued to discuss the miraculous rescue of the merchant. The returning Amanda handed Hector his portion of the reward for catching the bandits, and the decent amount of coin surprised the young gentleman. Albedo also expressed a desire to reward Hector for his rescue, but the lad explained that he had enough money, and so it was not worth it for the merchant to spend. But as it turned out, Albedo decided to give Rin as a reward. The merchant explained that the girl was good at reading, writing, counting, and doing various household chores, so she would be very useful to Hector in the new place. Rin was embarrassed by her master's decision, and Albedo admitted that he had noticed how the girl liked the young master very much, and so it would be better this way. Hector was only surprised at the slave girl's complete lack of hatred for her master Albedo. The merchant then touched the girl's hand and cancelled their slave contract, giving Rinna her freedom. Albedo suggested that Hector make a new contract with Rin, if of course he wanted to. But the young master said that since Rin was now a free woman, he did not need a slave and did not want a slave contract. Hector asked if Rin willingly wanted to go with him to the village of Boda. The girl was amazed at this kind attitude and stated that if Hector did not mind, she would like to live on his lands and under his rule. Rin thanked Hector for her freedom and the life she had saved in the forest. Rin gave in to her emotions and exclaimed that she wanted to be always with Hector. The young Earth Mage rejoiced at his new companion and thanked Albedo. All that remained was to continue their journey and finally reach their new home. The time on the road went much faster, and it had been half a month since Hector had left the kingdom's capital city of Grand. The young lord's wagon occasionally stopped at towns that came across the road, and gradually they approached the village of Boda. The road grew more and more suspicious, and Amanda sent little Orum on a scout who could warn in case of a threat. The excited Orum soon returned and reported the terrible events in the village of Boda. It turned out that right now this humble settlement was being attacked by ferocious orcs. Orum explained that there were many orcs outside of the village, and it was unlikely that the village's fence would be able to withstand such an attack for long. Sorceress Doreen stated that orcs are D-rank monsters and ordinary villagers cannot handle them. An agitated Nora asked what they should do in this situation. Without waiting for Amanda's decision, Hector exclaimed that they should immediately rush to the village, repel the orc attack, and save the villagers. But Amanda stopped the young man's noble impulse. Amanda explained that the task of her team to escort Ecto to the village and no more, and no one will pay them for killing orcs, so it is a wasted risk. In her own way, the adventuress was right of course, and Hector decided to add motivation to the adventurers. The young lord promised 1 gold coin for each track killed and announced the start of the orc hunt. The team of adventurers agreed to such terms and promised to destroy all orcs. At the same time, Hector asked Rin to stay in the carriage and promised that as soon as it was safe, he would take the girl. Meanwhile, the villagers were desperately holding back the onslaught of the ferocious orcs, and the entire defense of the village was led by the headman Oji. The situation was not easy, and everyone realized that the forces were unequal and the gate would soon be broken. But at the most tense moment, from the rear of the orcs attacked a team of adventurers together with young Hector. The adventurers were able to take the orcs by surprise and set about decimating the population of the vile monsters. The locals were surprised by the unexpected help and felt elated when the first orcs dropped dead. The young Earth Mage used his abilities once again and brought down a massive earthen wall on the treacherous invaders, from which there was little escape. Hector decided that probably for an ordinary Earth Mage, such a powerful spell was the limit of his abilities. But Hector had a huge amount of magical power, and it was easy for him to create such powerful spells. The orcs were numerous, and Hector began throwing huge stones at them, which instantly took the monsters' lives. The Earth Mage did not limit himself to attack spells and effectively applied his sword skills. The adventuress Amanda was surprised by such skills of Hector because she thought he was only an Earth Mage. But the lad explained that being an aristocrat, he had mastered swordsmanship well thanks to experienced teachers specially paid for by his father. Amanda only asked Hector not to take too much booty from them so that they could make a good living, to which Hector promised not to offend the adventurers and to reward them generously. After the tedious battle, little Orum hurriedly ran up to Hector and told him of his observations. The nimble half-dwarf very quickly collected all the magic stones from the orcs and reported that there were 24 in all. Amanda explained that it would be enough for the adventurers to get gold coins, and the magic stones Hector could take for himself. Such crystal stones contain the magical energy of a slain monster. Such magic stones fall from almost every monster, and X can be favorably exchanged. In the end, Hector decided to take only half of the magic stones. And since Amanda and her team had helped him a lot, the stones would be an additional bonus for their participation in the battle. Amanda replied that they were fine with that and was glad for the extra profit. Ecto remembered how negatively the adventuress had initially treated him, but now changed her mind very quickly. The headman of Oji decided that his village had been helped to deal with the orc invasion by the adventurer and thanked him for his help. Hector immediately introduced himself and stated that he had been appointed head of the village of Boda by order of Margrave Glenrid. The appearance of the new lord puzzled the Oji headman and caused him to think. To convince the local headman, Hector handed over a letter with orders from his father. It was the envelope of the Glenrid family that OG immediately recognized. Finally, after reading the letter from the Margrave, OG announced to all the villagers that they now had a new lord, and it was thanks to him that the village had been saved. The villagers were happy and thanked the new lord. OG explained that their village was the simplest and they had nothing to thank him for saving it. But Hector promised to make every effort to turn the village into a full-fledged town. The joyful headman immediately offered to give them a small tour of the village, and Hector agreed. All the houses appeared dilapidated and hanging on by their last breath. All the fields had long since withered and the villagers were exhausted. The situation was even worse than the young lord had imagined. Hector realized that he had a lot of work to do in this village to transform it into a normal settlement. The headman then apologized and explained that there were no inns in this village, so there was no place for the young lord to stay. But Hector stated that this was not a problem at all and he would have plenty of free land. OG provided a suitable piece of land that Hector liked. The land mage stated that he intended to build his own house if no one minded. The headman was of course okay with it and offered to use the plot to Hector at his discretion. With the help of earth magic, the young lord was able to create many bricks and then put together a beautiful house with them. The house looked much better than the houses of the locals, and that pleased Hector. It only took 15 minutes to create the magnificent house, and it delighted everyone who saw it. The wonderful and sturdy brick house really stood out from the surrounding landscape. The adventurers hurried to visit the new house and recognized that the outside of the house looked amazing, but the inside was a bit dull. Hector explained that it was difficult to create furniture with magic, so he would soon get it by other means. Amanda was surprised at all by the creation of this house and asked if Hector could build a house for her team using magic. The young earth mage reminded Amanda that she was going to return back to the capital after fulfilling the receipt on the escort. But the bold adventuress said that she thought that this village of Boda, under the rule of such a skillful lord, would be a more interesting place, and besides, there were no adventurers and therefore no competition for her team. Amanda liked this idea very much, because now he was really seen as a real lord, and the presence of a team of experienced adventurers would make the life of the village safer. Hector decided to start by building a house for Amanda and her team, and then rebuild all the houses in this village. It would be necessary to gradually make their area more livable. The next day, without wasting time, Hector set about rebuilding all the houses in the settlement. Orum's help came in handy in this endeavor, for she was also an earth mage. The half-dwarf girl was excellent at organizing walls, floors, and other tasks. All the walls surrounding the village were changed to earthen walls, and it was decided that the gates would be made of sturdy iron. Iron raw material was in short supply, but there was plenty of iron ore left, so Hector used magic to manipulate its constituent elements and purify the ore. This was probably a unique way of using magic, as Hector formed his concept from knowledge from Japan. In the end, the young lord processed all the iron ore that was in the village, and after creating a strong gate, Hector gave the leftover iron to the village blacksmith Birkin. After the exhausting work, Hector and Orum decided to rest and have lunch, as they did not have time for it during the day. The young lord was met at the doorstep by Rin and informed that the food was ready. Hector was surprised at the maid's clothes the girl had put on. Rin explained that it made it easier for her to do all the housework. But Hector reminded Rin that she was no longer a slave, and they were no longer bound to her by contract, so she could do whatever she wanted. Rin confessed that her sincere desire was to stay with Hector and always take care of him, so it would be better for everyone if she became a maid in the house. The young lord confessed that he had not expected such a thing, and Orum demanded that they start dinner immediately. But before starting the meal, Hector wanted to wash after his hard labor. Rin promised to immediately prepare a basin of hot water and a towel. But Hector stopped the girl and asked everyone to go with him to the garden, where he had already thought of something interesting. Hector quickly found a suitable place, and Orum asked if another house was going to be built. But the Earth Mage remembered that for his idea, there were no active geysers nearby at all, and so he would have to do some drilling. Hector then applied magical geologic exploration to find the right spot. Earth magic allowed Hector to examine the composition of the earth within the range of his magic power, and he was able to thoroughly examine everything at a depth of Bolan 500 meters. After finding the desired location, the young mage decided to dig a huge hole and surround it with stones. After that, it was necessary to make a deep hole underground. Soon from the hole made a real geyser of hot water came out, and the girls were happy with the appearance of an incredible outdoor bath. Enjoying the hot bath, Hector felt his life gradually getting better, because it is a real pleasure to relax in warm water, and in a bathtub created by his own efforts. Unexpectedly, Aurum joined young Hector and was glad to be able to lie in hot water. The Earth Mage was embarrassed by the girl's openness, but he did not argue. Without giving Hector a second thought, Rin joined the bath and promised to help her master wash, rub his back, and give him a relaxing massage. Soon Amanda also came to the smell of hot water. The adventuress asked if Hector had decided to make such a hot spring just for himself and had completely forgotten about his codes and arms. Soon the whole team of adventurers joined in the water treatments, and Hector began to resent the fact that everyone had come uninvited. But no one reacted to this, and all they did was demand that the Earth Mage create the same hot spring in the adventurer's home. Hector's young body could not withstand such an emotional strain, and the young lord hurriedly ran away from the company of girls. Thanks to this ridiculous situation, a public bathhouse was built in the village of Boda the next day, much to the delight of the locals. After studying the local soil, Hector determined that there was no way to grow anything on this nutrient-poor land. Chief Oji told how they had tried adding forest soil to the land, but it had no effect. And as a result, the village has a very poor harvest year after year. Hector realized that it had already been 2 weeks since he became a lord. Thanks to the adventurer squad attacking wings, all the houses had been rebuilt and the water supply had been installed. Now it was time to deal with the food problem as well. According to the headman, it turned out that the locals tried to hunt, but they could only kill low-rank monsters. Therefore, there was still not enough meat to overcome hunger. Rin advised to start training hunters who could increase the safety of the village. But Hector stated that Amanda and her team were much better suited for that role. Therefore, it was better to focus on the crop problem until the adventurers returned from hunting. The young Earth Mage asked to open the back gate and bring in the forest soil. Headman Oji recalled that they had already tried such a method before, but it had no result. Hector didn't argue and simply insisted on his request to mix different soils. Oji followed the Lord's example and asked the villagers to comply with Hector's order. The young mage noticed the beautifully forged iron gates and was once again glad that his village had excellent blacksmiths. The residents asked Hector how much forest soil was needed. The resourceful lord explained that 1 cart was sufficient, and this surprised the boys, for they had already prepared themselves for hard labor. Hector decided that his land improvement magic primarily existed to improve the soil. Magic improves the fertility of the soil by adding magical power. But it has no effectiveness if the initial soil does not contain a certain amount of nutrients. Therefore, some forest soil should be added for the initial stage. Once the soil was mixed, Hector activated his magic power, and just a few minutes later, he reported that everything was already ready. Headman Oji was surprised at the speed of improvement. The residents confirmed the transformation of the soil into fertile soil and said that now they could definitely grow a lot of vegetables and even more than ever. Rin praised her lord for his excellent work, and Hector replied that he hoped he had not spoiled anything. The headman, along with all the villagers, gathered to thank the new lord for reviving farming from the village. But Hector reminded them that it was in his interest too, so everyone should work together. This response pleased the people, and they continued to praise and thank the young lord. Among the crowd of people, Hector noticed a silhouette that looked like orcs and was immediately frightened, but immediately a friendly laughter was heard. It turned out to be disguised Aurum and Doreen, who had returned to the village and decided to play a trick on the young lord and were happy that they had succeeded. Amanda reported that they had hunted 3 orcs and 1 huge boar. Therefore, because of this success, the villagers would have enough fresh meat for a long time. Amanda gave a colorful account of the successful hunt in the dangerous forest and demanded compensation for the meat for the whole team. Hector did not argue and immediately gave Amanda 4 gold coins. This cooperation proved to be mutually beneficial, and the adventurers were helping out nicely with the upkeep of the village. The headman was also excited about the new opportunities and constantly suggested something new. Amanda was surprised when Hector asked the adventurers to take on the job of training the local hunters. The young lord explained that the people wanted revenge on the forest monsters, and if they could learn to hunt, the food would become much more varied. As a reward, Hector promised to give Amanda all the magic stones from the monsters. Hector decided that the villagers needed food, not magic stones. Moreover, the more excellent hunters the adventurers could train, the higher Amanda's income would be, which would also improve cooperation. Amanda didn't hesitate long and agreed, because such a deal suited her, and the adventurer promised to make every effort to train the hunters. Hector was pleased with Amanda's agreement, and Rin provided a list of potential people to train as hunters. The list turned out to be 45 men between the ages of 14 and 30 with suitable physique and physical strength. Hector suggested that all applicants be divided into different groups, so that some would be trained in bow wielding and the rest in sword and spear wielding. The half-elf Zephyr showed her desire to become an instructor to train the recruits and explained that she could not only teach the bow, but would also teach the sword. Hector did not expect such eagerness from the silent Zephyr, but was pleased with her desire. Zephyr was a beautiful archer with a kind heart, and such a gentle person would be perfect for the role of an instructor. Hector immediately approved of the half-elf girl's candidacy. Amanda, when she learned of Zephyr's decision to become an instructor, was furious and immediately came to the young lord's house. The angry adventuress growled that she had no intention of fighting, but would not allow Zephyr to be in charge of training new recruits. Hector asked if Amanda was worried that because of Zephyr's beauty, the apprentice hunters wouldn't concentrate on training. But Amanda barked that Hector knew nothing about Zephyr at all, and it wasn't the last warning that was best not to ignore. The village lord thought about Amanda's words and realized that he really hadn't met these adventurers that long ago, and so he knew too little of all the details about each of them. The only thing Hector could say about the archer Zephyr was that she was a very beautiful and olfactory girl. What made this half-elf girl stand out most from the rest was her beautiful emerald green hair. For all her outward attractiveness, Zephyr still seemed to be a very kind-hearted and judicious half-elf. At least that's what Hector thought. But Zephyr turned out to be not like that at all in training. The half-elf formidably introduced herself to the students and stated that she would be their instructor for 3 months. But during training, she could be called Mommy. The local boys thought it was just a joke from the pretty lady, but to make sure, Zephyr took down a huge tree with just one blow of her blade and warned that her training would be quite specific. The recruits immediately felt fear and forgot about the fun. Zephyr was no longer a sweet girl and a vicious warrior. The half-elf warned that she would punish most severely those who did not like her training, and she would not tolerate frivolous behavior from anyone. All the recruits obediently shouted, "Yes, Mommy," expressing their full agreement, and Zephyr ordered several marathons around the village. Hector was once again convinced that when it comes to battle, everyone's personality can change. That was how the demonic instructor's hellish training of the village's hunters began. 3 months after the training, the former recruits had turned into experienced hunters and formed a special unit. As usual in the morning, one of the guys reported the results of the patrol and found that there were no threats to the settlement. Hector thanked them for their service and advised the hunters to rest at least once in a while. Some time later, a sentinel on the battlements reported the rapid approach of an unknown wagon and asked what the orders would be. The young lord marveled at the possible guests. Then an attentive sentinel shouted that the wagons had stopped some distance from the city walls, and it was not yet clear what was happening. Hector was excited and hurried to the wall to see the strange visitors for himself. It had been a long time since he had come to this village, but this day there had never been any visitors yet. Hector looked through the telescope and immediately recognized the familiar clothes. It was the cheerful merchant Albedo with whom they had not seen for a long time. Soon the owner of the village was welcoming the guest into his home and treating him to aromatic tea with various delicious sweets. Hector noticed that Albedo had arrived exactly 3 months later, as promised. The merchant apologized for the slight delay, for after all, he was a few days mistaken due to trade affairs in one town. Albedo admitted that this village was very different from the rumored settlement. The first thing the trader noticed was the very beautiful houses, which were almost as good as new, as well as the beautiful green fields. The outer walls protecting the village and the strong iron gates deserved special praise. Albedo was really happy for his friend and wondered if it was all thanks to earth magic. Hector was pleasantly surprised by the merchant's kind words and explained that he was not going to stop there. Albedo replied that he would look forward to the able leader's new accomplishments. The enterprising merchant then offered to cut to the chase and clapped his hands spectacularly. Immediately, stout lads entered the room and brought in several huge sacks at Albedo's behest. As it turned out, the merchant brought a lot of different goods. And the first thing that Albedo sold in the Bod's message was essential goods. All of this was quickly converted into cash. Also, Albedo bought up almost all the magic crystals and monster materials collected by the residents. Thanks to such trade, Boda village had become much richer than before. The merchant admitted that he didn't expect to find so many useful goods in this village at all. And now he noticed how promising it was for trade. Albedo expressed a desire to set up a trading post in this place, if of course Hector did not mind. The young lord was sure that the villagers would be thrilled to have their first store. The friends quickly agreed on the organization of the store, and Albedo generously offered 20% of all sales as a tax. But Hector was even more generous and decided that only 10% would suffice. The merchant warned of the large construction costs, but Hector promised to personally build the store. At the same time, the lord of the village asked Albedo to take care of forming fair prices for food so that the villagers could afford a lot. The merchant hesitated, and Hector asked if there was a problem with that. Eventually, the peddler agreed to these terms, and Hector offered to go immediately to the site where the construction of Albedo's first store would take place. The friends decided that it would be best if the store stood in the center of the village. After all, the village has a main street that is always busy. This location was ideal for doing business. The merchant asked when construction would begin. Hector proudly stated that it would start right now and the whole construction would take about 20 minutes at most. Albedo thought it was a joke, laughed heartily. But when the store appeared out of nowhere in just half an hour, the merchant stopped believing his eyes. And Hector suggested that he ask Oram about the interior decoration, since she was a great expert in it and could fulfill any preferences. Albedo was delighted with the creation of the store in only 20 minutes and confessed that he never ceased to be amazed at being in this village. And now it was clear how wonderful a thing magic was. The merchant decided that now all he had to do was to put all the remaining goods into the new store and called a certain Kai. A minute later, a cat girl came running in and asked what Albedo wanted. The merchant asked Kay to be the manager of the store in the border village. The girl cat immediately started crying and saying that she didn't want to be in this backwoods village unknown to anyone. But as soon as Albedo promised a generous reward for such a remote assignment, Kay instantly changed her mind and asked not to give the job to anyone. Kay thanked Hector for allowing her to trade and confessed that she had heard a lot about the skillful lord. Hector thanked in return, and thus the first ever store run by a cat girl was opened in the village of Boda. A few days after Albedo's departure, an unforeseen situation occurred that the sentries on the walls were the first to know about. A huge crowd of refugees were rapidly approaching the village, frightened and demanding help. The sentries immediately began ringing the bells, alerting the whole village to the strange invasion. Amanda and her entire team of adventurers immediately reacted to the alarm and prepared for the worst. Hector was the fastest to the city walls and wondered what was even going on. The sentries had reported a huge crowd of people, more than 100 in number, approaching. And to all appearances, someone was chasing them. The young lord was horrified at what was happening and personally decided to see the refugees. Thanks to a quality binocular, Hector found out that the frightened people are trying to escape from the nasty goblins, who in turn are not too far behind. The agitated lord ordered the main gate to be opened, and once the entire crowd of refugees had run through it, then immediately close it, and then intercept the goblins at the outer wall. The defenders of Boda village clearly carried out their lord's order, and in the meantime, Hector asked the adventurer squad attacking wings to take on the goblins and destroy the vile creatures. All the adventurers were already fully prepared for battle, and Amanda promised to make the best of it, as she always did. Once outside the city gates, the team of adventurers lined up in battle order and the heroes rushed forward. Outside the walls were lagging behind the general mass of people and had to hurry. Of course, with the adventurer squads was the head of the village himself, Hector. The Earth Mage once again used his magical powers and created an earth barrier. The goblins turned out to be smart monsters and hurried to move around. But the accurately fired arrows of the half-elf Sepher immediately destroyed the most active goblins. In addition to Sepher's arrows flew arrows from the city walls. Well-trained hunters perfectly wielded their bows and kept the insolent goblins at bay. Soon enough, the battle turned into an extermination of goblins, and it became obvious that the hunters trained under Sepher's guidance had become very strong defenders of the village of Boda. The mages in Amanda's group, Doreen and Orim, supported the rest of the team perfectly with their fire spells. Ecto meanwhile found his fighting style and balanced his use of earth magic and blade fencing. All of this combined to give the village of Boda a tremendous level of military might and excellent defense against any monsters. As the confrontation continued, Amanda noticed an oddity in that they had already outnumbered half of the goblins, but their morale was still at a high level. Although in this situation, the monsters should have started retreating long ago. Amanda, pondering the secret behavior, didn't notice the danger behind her, but fortunately Hector had time to warn the adventurer. Amanda managed to jump aside, but the suddenly appearing Goblin King was able to catch the sorceress Doreen. Amanda didn't expect to see such an opponent and became confused. Immediately afterward, Amanda saw huge fireballs that were rapidly approaching. The Goblin Mages and Goblin Generals organized a counterattack and seized the initiative. Amanda realized the reason for the increased belligerence of the opponents, and it lay in the presence of higher goblins on the battlefield. The bold adventuress and commander of the attack wings decided to destroy the Goblin King and save the sorceress Doreen. Amanda rushed forward and dodged the Goblin King's attack with a stabbing blow with her blade. A roar of terrible pain echoed far beyond the borders of the city, and the severed arm of the Goblin King released the sorceress Doreen. The Goblin King was furious and tried to avenge his lost limb, but an earth net created in time by Hector blocked all his movements. Wasting no time and realizing that the most opportune moment had arrived, Amanda ordered everyone to attack the Goblin King together. The goblins, having lost their king, soon panicked and began to scatter. The village was defended, and Hector and his team of heroes returned to the settlement limits. The excited Rin rejoiced at her lord's return and rushed to embrace him. One of the refugees introduced himself as Redan and explained that he was the acting headman of the village of Bach, which was nearby. Hector introduced himself in response and asked where their headman was. Redan explained that the headman, who was his father, along with many of the villagers, had been killed by goblins, and their entire village had been almost completely destroyed, and now they had nowhere to return. Hector now realized what a terrible situation these poor people were in. The noble young lord said that they had a huge protective wall and fertile land, and so he was willing to take in all the refugees, if of course Headman OG was okay with it. OG of course was okay with this, and the matter was settled. Redan was delighted at Hector's kindness and asked if they could all really stay. The Earth Mage confirmed his offer, unless of course Redan himself was okay with it. Through an incredible coincidence, the population of the village of Boda had grown, and this gave a strong impetus for development. Due to the wishes of the residents, the church in Bach village was moved to Boda village, and new houses were all built. The priest from Bach village, Saint Father Bagini, expressed the gratitude of all his parishioners to Hector and rejoiced at the opportunity to conduct the divination ceremony. Hector himself was happy to see people getting a second chance. Unexpectedly, during the conversation between Hector and the Bagini priest, an excited Rin entered the room. The young lord asked the girl to wait for him for a while and promised to come soon so she could tell him everything. But Rin was worried about something very much and rushed to her lord, trying to explain herself. Hector was perplexed by this situation. Rin started apologizing and trying to explain, although she was very bad at it. Hector asked if the maid was bothered by the habit that forbade slaves from entering the church. In this magical world, slaves were on a delicate social level and were constantly discriminated against. Rin was particularly exposed to this since she lived in the capital city of Grand. And in the capital city, just as slaves are forbidden to enter the church. But it was already necessary to get rid of these prejudices and make Rinner realize that she had a very different life. Hector decided to do his own thing and surprised the upset girl. Despite Rin's resistance, Hector took her to the church and asked the priest Bajini to perform a divination ceremony on her. Bajini was not against it, but Rin began to assure that a woman like her could not go through the ceremony with the priest. But the young lord was once again reminded that Rin was no longer a slave, and therefore no one will ever despise her again. Rin painfully remembered all her wrongs from her childhood and how she had been treated by evil people. With excitement, the beautiful maid cried and could no longer stop the salty flow from her eyes. Emotions of resentment mixed with a moment of joy, and the girl could not calm down. After Amanda and her team returned from the hunt, she was very surprised to learn that Rin had acquired the skills of light magic after the divination ritual. Hector explained that the way Rin could use recovery magic was the best proof of her new abilities. Amanda felt a pang of envy, because healer mages are very rare and hard to find, so it would be nice to get Rin on her team. Amanda offered Rin to quit her job as a maid and join her team. At the same time, the adventuress promised to pay 3 times as much. But Rin refused without a second thought and declared that her calling was to serve Hector. It was probably the first time Amanda had ever heard such an unfortunate refusal, and she became very upset. Hector decided to distract the adventuress and inquired about the results of the hunt. The young lord explained that food was of course important, but he didn't want the adventuress to overdo it and lose all her strength during the dangerous hunt. Hector asked Amanda to take more care of her health and the health of her team. The adventuress agreed with the lord's opinion and promised to change her schedule of forays into the forest. Amanda told how they had seen the orcs start to rebuild their village deep in the forest, and so they decided to get rid of them as soon as possible. And judging by the tracks after the recent battle, the goblins had been driven out by the orcs. Hector realized that such a settlement of orcs must have an orc king, and it was dangerous. Amanda continued the story, and it was revealed that after establishing their own village, the orcs started kidnapping women to increase their population. Amanda explained that she once rescued a woman who had been held captive by orcs, and it was a pitiful sight while there. Initially, it wasn't even clear if the woman was alive or not, as she was too in a terrible condition. Amanda felt all the woman's pain and comforted the captive by explaining that she was safe now. But since she had become pregnant by the orc, her condition was different. Eventually, the woman could not come to terms with all that had happened and soon committed suicide. Rin and Hector were shocked by such a terrible story and realized how terrible monsters orcs are. After all, even without killing immediately, they ruin people's lives. But the always cheerful Aurum said that this time no one had been kidnapped and such a thing would never happen again. Hector looked at little Aurum and said that she spoke very convincingly. The young lord thanked the entire team of adventurers for their protection and said that the village was having a meat festival today and a lot of orc meat needed to be cooked. The feast turned out great. Amanda and everyone else were enjoying themselves and drinking cold fresh ale. On this day, all the villagers got orc meat, and everyone had a great time rejoicing and having fun together. Hector informed the half-elf Sepher that the Bach villagers would also be joining the hunter squad, and they needed to put in some grueling training to make them stronger. Therefore, only Sepher can be relied on in this matter. The adventuress revealed that all the hunters try to keep up with her even when it's very hard. Also, Sepher explained that she uses interesting physical modifications during her training. Hector remembered Hunter Ed, who really changed a lot, as if he became a different person after undergoing the training. Soon, a drunk Amanda came in and asked why Hector and Sepher weren't participating with everyone else in the drinking contest. Amanda smelled strongly of alcohol, and Hector even began to worry about her. But the adventuress replied that she felt fine, and in general, she really liked this village. Amanda explained that in these places you can hunt as many magical beasts as you want, and the village does not stop developing. And it would be great if Ecto made this village a real town. Sepher, Ecto and Amanda had another long discussion about further cooperation and possible improvements to the village. In the end, a very drunk Amanda just fell asleep, and Ector remembered how she hated him the most at first. Ector looked at the sleeping Amanda, who looked like a child, and thanked her for her support and help. In this mode, the winter passed, and once spring had fully warmed the earth, Ector and the Attack Wings squad traveled to find the resources needed to further develop the village. The destination of the journey was at the end of a dangerous forest in the Abolker mountain range. Aurum explained that this expedition would be very long and asked if Ector was sure he was ready to embark on such a difficult journey. The young lord explained that the team of adventurers could not do without him, for only he could grade the ore. Ector was sure that the adventurers could not cope with such a thing, and that only an earth mage could do it, and Aurum did not have the strength. The sorceress Aurum reminded him that there was a mine of iron ore near the village and asked that wasn't it enough. Ector explained that they would keep this mine for their own use. And the goal of the expedition is to find mines of mithril or other valuable metals to expand trade. And also with the new materials they could expand their own production, and all this would solve two problems at the same time. Aurum declared that in that case she would be the first to go exploring and ran ahead without even hearing the warning about how steep the hill ahead was. Amanda tried to get to the very top as soon as possible to enjoy the marvelous view. In the meantime, Aurum returned and reported possible danger. The half-dwarf girl explained that this hill looked very much like the back of a green dragon. Such a discovery caused Amanda to panic, and she ordered immediate departure from the place. Aurum was not wrong, and soon the hill began to move, dropping the named guests. The green dragon angrily asked why they were walking on his back. The huge head of the ferocious monster turned toward the squad of adventurers, and the dragon asked who they even were. The green dragon was angered by the appearance of the strange troop and tried to find out who they were. The most curious thing was that Ector heard the voice of the dragons in his head, and the communication took place with the help of telepathy. At the same time, the dragons had excellent intelligence and could speak human language with ease. The young lord hoped on his communication skills and wanted to come to a compromise with this huge monster that could easily destroy the entire adventurer squad. Ector apologized to the green dragon for rashly walking on its back and explained that their squad was heading to the distant Mount Abolker. The huge dragon scrutinized the young earth mage and asked that could such a small man really survive in a forest filled with dangerous monsters. Ector tried to be confident and replied that he was well aware of the dangers of the forest and was well aware that there were many monsters waiting for him there. But he did not expect to meet a real dragon at all, and was delighted by the majestic monster and happy to have such an unbelievable companionship. The green dragon wondered if Ector could make it through this forest and return home the same person he is now. Then the green dragon flapped its wings and flew upward, showering the travelers with a pile of rocks. The majestic monster declared that if Ectoru from the trek to Mount Abolker, it would be an incredible achievement. The green dragon promised that if that happened, they would definitely meet again. After that, the huge monster disappeared into the clouds, and the band of adventurers rejoiced at the miraculous rescue. Amanda said that she was glad that things had turned out this way, because she would not want to fight with someone they could not defeat. And now they must continue on their way. Amanda suggested that they should be more careful and take care not to get into a similar situation next time. Of course, supported the squad leader and moved much more cautiously. After a week of trekking, the adventurer squad finally left the dangerous forest and began to feel the cool mountain breeze. It was gradually getting colder and colder, and the peak of the Abolker mountain range was inexorably approaching. The travelers were surrounded by solid rocks and stones, and Amanda wondered where Ector was even going to look for ore here. The Earth Mage explained that he needed some time to look around and find the right place, and then he would report back. Hector chose a more or less suitable location and activated the magical geological survey to find out what kind of useful materials might be here. After a while, Hector announced that he had discovered something. Aurum confessed that she could sense mithril. The young lord agreed with the half-dwarf girl's observations, and such a valuable find pleased Amanda. All the adventurers were happy with the precious element they had found and realized that such a long trek was necessary. Amanda was the most impatient and suggested that they start digging immediately. To begin, the young lord suggested going inside the cave, which was located higher up. Amanda agreed and ordered everyone to be extremely cautious and careful as there might be someone living in the cave. The climb up the steep cliff was not easy, and the adventurer had to show all her mountaineering skills. At one point, little Aurum lost her balance because of a rock broken off under her hand. But the girl was able to grab on to another ledge in time and not fall down. At that moment, Aurum's whole life flew before her eyes, for she thought she was going to die. After this incident, Aurum regained her strength and decided to continue climbing, reminding herself not to look down. Soon, the entire team of adventurers was able to reach the top, and a huge entrance to a mysterious cave opened before them. Hector praised himself for his foresight, for he had prepared torches in advance on the way. Amanda agreed that the torches were very useful, for they were an essential part of any cave exploration. A wary wizard, Doreen, admitted that this cave seemed very strange to her. But as it turned out, she wasn't the only one with such a premonition. All the adventurers noticed how they were overcome by a strange sensation inside the cave. After a while, everyone realized that almost all of the holes in the cave looked the same, and it seemed as if they had been dug artificially. Hector looked at the walls with interest and decided that perhaps they were not the first ones here. Soon a fork appeared in front of the travelers, and they had to decide which way to go. Aurum stated that she felt that the mithril mine was on the left, and it was the left opening that looked fresher. But suddenly, the little girl felt a blow from a rock. Then, from the depths of the cave, a rough voice asked who had entered his domain without asking. The adventurers did not expect this at all, and tried to see with their torches who was talking to them. Soon, a red-haired dwarf appeared and asked the travelers who they were. Hector stepped forward and explained that they were from the village of Boda in the kingdom of Falsford. The hairy gnome was surprised to see a member of the human race and asked if they had really come through a dangerous forest. The local cave dweller then gave the young lord a very big hug, thus welcoming him. Hector felt his bones rattle from such hospitality, but had to endure. The dwarf turned out to be a friendly fellow named Donovan and was from the kingdom of the High Dwarves. Donovan explained that they were a proud race that spent most of their lives in caves, and this was the first time he had ever seen real people. It became apparent that this red-haired gnome was not the only inhabitant of the cave. Hector admitted that he had heard of a tribe of gnomes as strong and agile creatures, and many of them supposedly work as blacksmiths. But Donovan explained that they are completely different dwarves and live off of mining mithril and adamantium. They then refine them into essential commodities, and they have little or no contact with other races. Amanda was surprised that the dwarves used such expensive metals for everyday necessities, but judging by Donovan, he didn't know the value of the metal at all. Amanda was astonished, for an ordinary dwarf's pickaxe was hundreds of times more expensive than her sword. Mithril is a very strong and light metal. Adamantium is the second strongest metal in the world, after orichalcum, and both of these metals were of great value and rarity. Donovan continued to show fine hospitality and invited the cave guests to meet the rest of his kin. Soon the band of adventurers found themselves amongst a settlement of dwarves, and Donovan introduced the guests to Gangan, the head of the clan. In doing so, Donovan explained that these men had managed to make their way through the dangerous forest. Judging by the look on Gangan's face and the rest of the dwarves, they were not as kindly disposed as Donovan, and the atmosphere quickly became tense. Donovan asked his tribesmen why they were so angry. After all, he had brought the most real people, and it was an amazing event. But the head Gangan, he angrily asked why these people had come to his home in the first place. Gangan stated that this land belonged to the High Dwarves, and it was a big mistake to come here. And now, regardless of the people's answer, they would never go back to where they came from, for the secret of the gnome country must not leave the cave. Hector was surprised at the hostile attitude after the words of Gangan, the chief dwarf, and it was obvious that there was no chance of good hospitality. Though perhaps for dwarves such an attitude is the order of the day, and the red-haired Donovan is just a friendly fool. Amanda prepared to settle things by force, but the young lord said it was all right and asked the adventuress not to make any unnecessary moves. Hector explained to the head dwarf that they were only looking for an ore vein. Therefore, it would be great to get a mining license from the dwarves, if that was possible, of course. Gangan bellowed back that he had never heard greater nonsense in his life. Head Gangan explained that the dwarves had protected this mountain for generations, and therefore all the ore veins of Mount Abolkur belonged to the highest dwarves and no one else. Hector explained that he wasn't trying to take away anything foreign by force, but was simply offering to bargain and establish a mutually beneficial relationship. Gangan was interested in the offer to bargain and thought. Hector explained that he could get anything here soon, and the dwarves could order any goods they needed. At that, the young lord thought that he didn't even know if there were any other mines in this region besides this one. Therefore, for the sake of the future of Boda Village, one should proceed as smoothly as possible to make an agreement with the harsh dwarves. Head Gangan continued to ponder over the proposal, and suddenly shouts were heard. The frightened gnome reported big trouble as the killer spider had settled deep in the cave, and also the spider was able to capture the children. At the same time, the spider's nest is too high, and there is no way to reach it. Hector and the adventurers decide that this is their chance to mend relations with the dwarves, and so need to help deal with the killer spider. Meanwhile, the spider was wrapping the kidnapped children in cocoons, preparing supplies for himself. The adventurers quickly tracked down the killer spider. Amanda boldly rushed forward, but not a great sword did not even scratch the huge monster. Immediately, Sepher stepped in and fired several arrows. Hector realized that the situation was too dangerous and decided to help the adventurers. With the help of earth magic, the Lord created some earth ledges and reached the cocoons, but it turned out that his sword could not cut through the web and free the children. The spider rushed to protect its prey and tried to attack the insolent man. The web released by the spider intentionally bound Hector's arm and left him virtually unarmed. But at that moment, a red-haired gentleman came to the rescue and freed Hector with a powerful blow of his axe. The young lord thanked him for his timely help, and Donovan explained that the spider's threads were too elastic and offered to use his weapon. The dwarf's axe was made of mithril and proved far better than any sword the adventurers were armed with. Hector liked the weapon very much and ordered all the adventurers to take up the mithril weapon. With the new weapon, there was a chance to defeat the spider assassin, and the team set to work. Everyone was very determined to make a real massacre of the spiders and free the harmless gnome children. Soon the adventurous party, along with Hector and Donovan, freed all the little children, who rushed back to their parents with tears of joy in their eyes. The spiders had been destroyed and the danger was over. The team of adventurers were quite pleased with themselves, for they had once again proved their ability to destroy even the most dangerous monsters. Hector and Donovan became even more friends and rejoiced in their success. Head Gangan apologized for his earlier words and admitted that they wouldn't have been able to deal with such a terrifying spider without a squad of adventurers. The head of the High Dwarves, on behalf of all his people, expressed gratitude for the rescue of his little compatriots. But Hector reminded them that they would not have handled the killer spider with their own weapons. The young lord then decided to make another request to Gangan. Hector explained that they needed the mithril material very badly, and they were not going to do anything bad with it, so it would be best if they agreed on a mutually beneficial relationship. Gangan replied that Hector was a very honest and interesting person. The head of the higher dwarves embraced Hector and admitted that he liked him, and so today they would have a drink and sing a song to thank each other. Gangan then stated that if Hector could outdrink him, then he might then perhaps open himself up to an offer to trade and establish a relationship. Hector was surprised at such a condition and realized that he was in for a stern test. Hector of course knew that dwarves were the most alcohol-resistant race and soon had to find out. Dwarves indeed drank incredible amounts of alcohol and yet stayed on their feet. The gnome feast did turn out to be grand. Music was playing everywhere, bonfires were sparkling, and everyone was drinking and then singing loudly. The team of adventurers enjoyed the hospitality and treats. Headganger explained that in such a harsh climate, no matter how much alcohol the dwarves had, it was never enough, and so they were willing to make an exchange of strong alcohol for quality mithril. Hector liked the idea, even though alcohol was scarce in his village. But one could ask to establish a supply of albedo, and then it would work out. Hector agreed to the terms of the head of the High Dwarves and promised to bring a huge supply of strong alcohol to the cave at all times. Thus was concluded a treaty of trade between the dwarves and the village of Boda. Hector was glad for the quick conclusion of the contract, or rather glad that he would not now have to participate in the alcoholic contest. But Gangan did not forget his words at all and reminded him that he would finally agree to a mutually beneficial trade only if he overdrank him. Hector thought that it was not even the alcohol itself, but the situation in which he found himself. After all, if he refused the dwarf's condition, the negotiations would break down, and so he must agree to the stupid alcoholic contest. As it turned out, the gnomes were not in the habit of drinking glasses and drank directly from the bottle in huge gulps. Hector felt the vile taste of strong alcohol, but still managed to pull himself together. With each new sip, the alcohol became more and more delicious, and after a while Hector was drinking it like ordinary water. Gangan was noticeably ahead in the number of bottles he drank, but he was still very drunk. After several hours of drinking alcohol together, a whole heap of empty bottles were lying around. But to everyone's surprise, the first to fall into a heavy alcoholic sleep was the head of the High Dwarves. Amanda praised Hector, for she didn't even expect him to win. But the young gentleman was very ill, and he literally collapsed on the adventuress, and then began terrible bouts of nausea. It went on like this for a long time, but eventually Hector was still able to sleep. The next morning, Hector woke up with a terrible hangover and was very surprised, for he was with his troop in the mountains. The journey continued, and soon a roar could be heard from another cave they had discovered. Hector warned that there was no sign of higher dwarves in the area, so one must proceed with caution. Donovan soon joined the squad and carefully surveyed the area while the others rested. Donovan asked why everyone else was awake so early, but Hector explained that it was due to a great rumble and roar. It turned out to be nothing, and Donovan explained that it was just the dwarves getting rid of the hard rocks that were in the way of digging the mine. As it turned out, the dwarves were using the blasting method, and indeed, soon a dwarf appeared with strange objects in his hands and promised to show them everything. After the charges were set in certain places, Donovan ordered everyone to hide. Hector waited with surprise for something incredible, and the red-haired gnome asked for patience. Soon the same gnome who was carrying the charges quickly came running and immediately hid, and a few seconds later there was a terrifying explosion that deafened all the travelers. Many rocks crumbled in the cave, and Donovan reported the success of the explosion and offered to keep digging. It all reminded Hector of the use of ordinary dynamite that had been used in his past life in the country of Japan. Lately, he had been having frequent dreams with new events from that strange place in his past life. Although Hector couldn't understand where the dwarves got their technology from, Amanda and Orem marveled at the power of the explosion and praised the dwarves for their ingenuity, then decided that such technology could be put to good use in destroying monsters. The fire sorceress Doreen was also impressed by what she saw, for this went even beyond the magic of the explosion, and from such power, it was unlikely that even the dragon itself could survive. Unexpectedly, Doreen decided to create an explosion much more powerful than that of dynamite. But Amanda was quick to talk the sorceress out of it. It turned out Doreen only wanted to give the notion that she could blow up no worse than the dwarves. Hector reassured the sorceress and explained that her magic was much stronger than normal explosions, and thought at the same time that Doreen was surprisingly competitive. Donovan explained that they had not invented the explosion technology themselves, but that it had been inherited from their ancestors. And the old rule of the dwarves was that no one but the higher dwarves should know how to blast. Hector decided that most likely this explosion technology for the higher dwarves was made by a reincarnated human like himself. There is simply no other explanation. And no matter how powerful this technology is, humans are better off not knowing it, so the dwarves are doing the right thing in keeping it a closely guarded secret. Then, walking through the cave, Hector noticed a strange piece of something unusual. Donovan himself was incredibly surprised. for it turned out to be a beautiful piece of adamantine ore. Donovan explained that even for this mine to encounter such a rare metal was a great fortune. Hector wondered if he could use his knowledge to produce adamantine ore like he does with iron ore. After all, it is enough to know the detailed composition of this material. The piece of adamantium they found was indeed beautiful, and the adventurers looked with interest at the rare specimen of ore they had only heard of before. Donovan explained that explosions often caused all sorts of materials to fall out of rocks, and there were surprises. Then the red-haired gentleman asked to borrow Hector's sword. After examining the quite ordinary blade, Donovan stated that this sword was badly damaged after yesterday's battle with the killer spider. Although it is still good for something, but in this condition, the sword will not last long. Donovan promised the young lord to make him a new sword and better yet make it out of fine adamantium. Hector was delighted at such a possibility and incredulously asked if Donovan would really make him such a sword. The red-haired dwarf explained that it would be his personal thanks for saving the little children yesterday. Moreover, Donovan promised to make all the adventurers a new weapon, but only out of mithril. Indeed, after this conversation, Donovan enthusiastically set about forging but weapons for all the guests of the land of the dwarves. Hector was delighted with the sword he received. This weapon was indeed perfect and incredibly sharp. The young earth mage admitted that it was the first time he had held such a wonderful sword in his hands and was very grateful for such a gift. Donovan replied that he himself was pleased with the result and could proudly call it a masterpiece of blacksmithing. All the adventurers were also pleased with the beautiful new weapon and wondered how it could have been made so quickly. Amanda decided that with this weapon their team would become even more skillful and dangerous. Hector then returned to the head of the dwarves, Gangan, who was suffering from a terrible hangover and headache. Gangan admitted that it was the first time he had passed out while drunk. And since young Hector was able to defeat him, then the trade agreement kicks in and stays in effect. And he, as the head of the higher dwarves, is willing to trade mithril for the finest of human alcohol. The chief dwarf admitted that he is completely ignorant of the market prices for alcohol, but is willing to trust Hector. Therefore, he asked not to underestimate the cost of mithril supplies, because it really should be an expensive metal. Hector agreed that mithril is very valued among the people, and only the best quality alcohol will be brought for it in large quantities. Gangan ordered that all the travelers' bags be filled with mithril ore and took a promise from Hector to repeat their splendid drinking. The head of the high dwarves then reminded Donovan of his desire to speak. The vivacious red-haired dwarf immediately became serious and reminded Hector how much he treasured his place among the high dwarves. But after meeting Hector and his friends, he began to recognize the human race better. And so there was a desire to learn about the outside world. Eventually, Donovan asked Hector to take him with him to his settlement and promised to become a better blacksmith. Hector recognized that Donovan's blacksmithing skills are amazing, and there is no such master among humans. Therefore, Donovan would be a great help in the development of the village, and all the villagers would thank him for this choice. The travelers packed for the return journey home, and Aurum promised to return to the land of the dwarves. Gangan asked Donovan to bring Donovan with him next time and promised to take revenge on Hector in a new drinking contest. The young lord promised to give the supreme dwarf a chance to win back, and said he was ready to drink with him anytime, even if he lost. Amanda, on the other hand, remembered the state in which the drunken Hector had been and thought it would be better to avoid such a mishap next time. In the end, thanks to the dangerous journey into the mountains, Hector and the adventurers made new friends, the higher dwarves, and left the main peak of Abulker in a positive mood. The way back home was of course again through a dangerous forest, and they had to be extremely careful. Danger indeed soon met the travelers in the person of 3 saber-toothed panthers. But since the squad now had mithril weapons, it was possible not to avoid fighting the dangerous monsters. But at the same time, everyone realized that they were not far from the Green Dragon Hill, and they didn't need any unnecessary attention. Hector remembered how the last time they met, the Green Dragon had promised that they would see each other again. But at the same time, no one wanted to provoke this huge monster, because there was no guarantee that they would be able to leave alive the next time they met. The The young lord decided to act wisely and exercise common sense to solve this problem with the least risks. Amanda asked Hector what he was interestingly reasoning with himself. But all plans were interrupted by a red-haired dwarf who declared that saber-toothed panthers were not dangerous at all and were just kittens to be welcomed. The red-haired do-gooder had no time to react to the swift attack of the swift animal and was thrown far aside. The other panthers took this as a signal for action, and now the battle could not be avoided. The adventurers realized that their weapons were forged of mithril, and they would be able to gain a quick victory over the ferocious animals. Amanda, like a true leader, rushed first into the attack, and with just a few precise movements destroyed all the saber-toothed panthers. Everyone, including Hector, marveled at the strength and agility of the adventuress. Of course, the magic stones fell out of the saber-toothed panthers, but Hector decided that if he added more luggage, the movement speed of the squad would slow down considerably. Therefore, it was better not to engage in battles with monsters in such a situation and find a bypass route. Amanda agreed with the young lord's reasoning and outlined the priorities for her squad. Most excited about this was little Orem, who hated carrying heavy weights. Donovan noticed how much the girl was suffering because of a very heavy sack and said that such a beautiful girl did not need to carry heavy things, and he would carry the sack himself. Gradually, Donovan volunteered to help the others as well and collected all the sacks of precious ore on himself, and then suddenly accelerated and took the lead. Such a rapid dash surprised all the travelers, and no one even immediately realized what had happened. Sepher shouted that the ugly red-haired dwarf had decided to steal from them and ran away with all the mithril. Hector couldn't believe what had happened and tried to understand why Donovan had run off ahead. The leader of the group, Amanda, rushed in pursuit, and Hector shouted warning that the green dragon's domain lay ahead. But the adventuress did not hear the young lord's words or simply pretended not to hear and continued to run after the dwarf. Amanda decided by all means to catch up with Donovan and take the valuable cargo, and at the same time to explain to the red-haired scoundrel that you cannot do that to people. Amanda continued to chase Donovan and marveled at the speed of the dwarf, for he carried heavy sacks and did not slow down. It was a matter of honor for the adventuress of the herd to retrieve the valuable mithril. But suddenly an incredible roar sounded so loud that all the birds soared above the forest and all the animals fell silent. The green dragon noticed the movement of the humans and decided to be active. Then the mighty monster realized that it had already met these travelers and declared that it had been waiting for them to appear. But further events came as a complete surprise to the team of adventurers and Hector. The red-haired Donovan, as it turned out, was not running away at all, but hurried to meet the green dragon, whom he embraced like an old friend. Hector asked if Donovan really knew the green dragon that well. The red-haired dwarf explained that the green dragon was a forest deity to the dwarves, and thanks to the dragon, the dwarves could sometimes go hunting in the forest. And as a thank you, he would sometimes bring the green dragon some mithril. A distraught Amanda still accused Donovan of stealing the mithril and running away. The good-natured dwarf declared that it wasn't true, but then realized that his behavior did seem very suspicious from the outside. Donovan explained that he was simply misunderstood, and he was very excited to meet the green dragon, so he ran to him forgetting everything. The dwarf began to apologize, and Hector realized that all doubts were in vain about Donovan's honesty. The green dragon told Hector that apparently his meeting with the higher dwarves had been a success. The young lord recounted the successful trek to MT, a bulker. The green dragon explained that Donovan had always been the kindest and most honest dwarf, and so there was no need to doubt him, for he only wanted to meet him soon. Hector then allowed Donovan to give half of the mithril ore to the green dragon. The red-haired dwarf rejoiced, but the sorceress Doreen said that she was against giving so much. Hector asked the girl to take it easy and look at the situation from the other side. Hector explained that all the harmony and balance of this dangerous forest is only kept normal because of the green dragon. So everyone owed something to the green dragon, and Donovan had helped the whole team and created great weapons for everyone. Donovan thanked Hector for his kind words and for the mithril for his friend. The adventurers and Hector watched with interest as the huge green dragon happily ate the mithril. The young lord decided that he just needed to be patient for a little while, and soon he would have a great deal of the precious metal. Finished with his meal, the green dragon thanked Hector for the tasty treat. The young earth mage promised the dragon that the next time he returned from Mount Abulker again, he would deliver some of the mithril to him. An overjoyed Donovan boasted to his friend that he had now decided to live in a human settlement. The green dragon replied that this was a very unusual decision for a high dwarf, but he respected the choice his friend had made. The green dragon then explained to Hector that if he had any problems in the dangerous forest, he could rely on him, and as a gift, the green dragon lent his strength. In parting, the green dragon asked the young lord to take care of Donovan. The travelers set off to continue their journey and soon made their way out of the forest and reached their home village. First to meet them ran out excited Rin and embraced her beloved lord, rejoicing at his return. The meeting was very touching, and then after calming down a bit, Rin asked who Hector had brought with him. Donovan explained that he was the highest dwarf and was going to be the best blacksmith in this village. The local blacksmith, Gangan, was pleased to have such an experienced blacksmith and admitted that although he was a blacksmith, he would be happy to learn the skills of the higher dwarves. The red-haired gentleman agreed to teach Gangan, and so he had his first apprentice among men. Sefer immediately asked if the weapons for the hunting party could be improved. Donovan promised to do his best and specified exactly what kind of weapons were needed. Aurum remembered the spider web she had taken with her from the gnome cave and decided that it would be perfect for improving Sefer's bow. Such strong material was perfect for the purpose, and Sefer thanked Aurum for such a gift. After returning, all the adventurers went back home and Donovan was left to Rin, while everyone else went to Kay's store. The cat girl was happy to receive such a valuable item and thanked her for bringing the mithril ore. Kay inquired about the exact ore vein the mithril was found in, but Hector replied that it was a secret. Kay couldn't satisfy her curiosity and jokingly called Hector a cunning lord. Hector, on the other hand, suggested that we get down to the matter of price. Hector explained that there would be regular shipments of mithril starting today, and so Kay should inform her leadership. But a large supply of good liquor was needed to establish a trade relationship. Kay agreed, but explained that there were some problems. The store manager explained that she didn't have much cash in the store, and when it comes to big deliveries, you have to report to Albedo. Hector asked to say hello to Albedo when Kay would make a request for a large supply of alcohol. The manageress promised to do the right thing and went about her business. After finishing all the business, Hector finally made his way home and felt a welcome relief. First, the young gentleman took a hot, relaxing bath, after eating a very tasty dinner prepared by Rin, and decided that now it was time to go to a normal bed, which he missed very much. After a long separation, the bed seemed much more comfortable than it actually was. Slowly falling asleep, Hector decided that tomorrow it would be necessary to build a house for Donovan the blacksmith. It would also be necessary to hear an account of what had happened in the village while he was away on the long trek. With these thoughts, Hector practically fell asleep. Through his sleep, the young lord felt something soft and felt a pleasant scent, but opening his eyes for a moment, Hector completely lost all sleepiness because Rin was beside him. The girl apologized and explained that she just missed him very much and wanted to look at the face of the sleeping lord and could not resist. Hector asked Rin not to blame herself as nothing terrible had happened. It was just a little unexpected to open her eyes and see Rin in such close proximity. The obliging maid asked for some attention, but Hector complained of feeling unwell and his heartbeat was racing. Rin claimed it was just excitement and began to say how glad she was to see the master. Hector and Rin discussed the details of the long journey to the gnome cave for a long time before they fully enjoyed each other's company and went to bed. A few days later, the merchant Albedo arrived in the village of Boda. Hector greeted his friend and apologized for having to travel such a long way. But the merchant was not at all saddened by his visit and was glad to meet. Albedo explained that he had received a message from Kay and therefore decided to personally bring a shipment of alcohol. Hector thanked him for such promptness, for it was indeed timely. Albedo was impressed with Hector's results in mining the rare metal mithril and was already envisioning future profits. The merchant asked if Hector had been able to find a new mine. The young lord pondered whether to tell the whole truth to Albedo. Eventually, the young lord told of the incredible journey to Empty, a bulker, but asked the trader to keep the information secret. Albedo promised not to comply with the request and admitted that such a dangerous journey was usually only within the power of experienced adventurers. Hector explained that this was roughly the case and had to feel the real danger several times. The master of the Boda village decided that it would be too dangerous to get to the dwarves' cave each time in this way, and so it would be an excellent solution to build an underground passage all the way to the mine. Hector also explained to the merchant that only he and the 5 adventurers knew the exact location of the desired mine, and so the amount of mithril was limited by their ability to carry the goods. Albedo decided that this would not be a big problem, for even a limited amount of mithril could make an excellent profit. Albedo reported one condition and asked Hector not to discuss the supply of mithril ore with any of the merchants again. In return, Albedo would undertake to take care of all transportation costs, as well as lower the prices of essential goods for the villagers. Hector of course agreed and asked if Albedo didn't trust him. The young lord reminded that he only knows one merchant, and that is Albedo, so he is willing to pay trust for trust. Hector promised to trade only with Albedo and asked him not to worry about it. The trader was happy at this answer, for he was now a monopoly in the mithril trade. After this conversation, Hector became not just a feudal lord, but a real person, for he signed a formal contract of cooperation with Albedo. The essence of this personal trade contract was that Hector could now avoid asking his father for permission to trade. At the same time, Hector realized that he needed to sell all the mithril he had as quickly and profitably as possible. After all, once this valuable commodity was on the market, it would immediately attract a lot of attention. And so one must proceed carefully to avoid problems. A few months after starting the mithril trade, it even attracted the interest of the Prime Minister of the Falsford Kingdom. Prime Minister Alfonso Granville was very puzzled by the problem that had arisen in the commodity market and tried to find some solution. The Prime Minister had clear evidence that there was a significant increase in the turnover of mithril in the Kingdom of Falsford, and so Alfonso instructed his subordinates to find any clues. But the results of the investigation were useless. The only thing that could be found out for sure was that the rare metal was getting more and more every day. The trade routes for the supply of mithril proved to be too cleverly scattered and thus impossible to trace. And whichever route was chosen, the only link was that the Albedo Trading Company was mentioned everywhere. There was also the attraction of one area that the Albedo merchant very often visited. This territory was Margrave Glenride's domain, and it was quite large. Suddenly, the Prime Minister was distracted from his thoughts by the pleasant voice of his granddaughter. In the room appeared the young creature Lilan, the Prime Minister's favorite granddaughter, who could always drive away the worst thoughts from her grandfather's mind with her mere presence. Prime Minister Alfonso asked why Lillian couldn't sleep. It was very late. But the beautiful granddaughter complained of insomnia. Lillian explained that she was very worried about her beloved grandfather because he was looking worse and worse every day, and this worry was keeping her awake. Alfonso replied that he was fine. It was just that he had a lot of important things to do lately, and alas, the Prime Minister has no other way. Especially the last case is too serious and takes a lot of time and energy. Lillian offered to talk about all the problems with her and promised that she would not tell anyone anything. The Prime Minister thought about it, for this information was not particularly confidential, and it would be interesting to talk about matters with the clever granddaughter, for perhaps with her fresh eyes she would advise something. Alfonso explained that recently, the trade of rare metal mithril had abnormally increased in the market of the capital. Lillian childishly asked that isn't that wonderful, since everyone can buy it as much as they want. The tired grandfather explained that the lords were obliged to report new mines to the government, but there had been no reports of mithril mines. And so this whole situation is too unusual and needs to be thoroughly investigated. Lillian asked if she understood correctly that if someone reported the location of their new mine to the government, they would of course lose some of their profits. Alfonso replied that this was not true at all, and that the owner of the mine should on the contrary be interested in cooperating with the government, for he would then gain a windfall and not lose profits. And the man who discovered such a fine mithril mine would be praised by the royal family itself. And besides, such a lord would become very famous throughout the kingdom. Lillian agreed that her grandfather was right, and there was no reason to hide information about her own mine. So in that case, there are still some reasons. Prime Minister Alfonso explained that the company in question, which distributes mithril, mainly runs its trade routes through the territory of the Margrave of Glenrid. But according to the map, there is only the village of Boda, which is surrounded by impenetrable forest on 3 sides. As it turns out, this village was built in order to exploit the resources of the vast forests stretching across the entire borderland. But as far as is known, the development of such a grand plan failed, and the village remained standing there and was later virtually abandoned. So it would not be surprising if there might be something behind such intensive development of the area, and who knows, there might be a mithril deposit there. There is also the possibility that the Margrave of Glenrid himself, who owns the land, does not know about the mithril, because a secret trade contract is signed between a merchant of Albedo and someone unknown, who found a new mine of mithril. Prime Minister Alfonso agonizes over whether he should report all this to His Majesty. Lillian asks if there are no border controls near this village. The thoughtful grandfather explained that he was just about to organize such a control, but that it required the written permission of the local Margrave. Also, Alfonso explained that if the mithril case were to go public, there was a chance that the distribution of mithril from this village would stop completely, and that was undesirable. Lillian proudly declared that she had thought of one way to help her beloved grandfather. Alfonso replied that he had never doubted his dear granddaughter's abilities and was willing to listen to her idea. Lillian hesitated a little with excitement as she realized that her idea would not please her grandfather very much. The young lady then declared that she would personally go to this village without revealing her true identity. The Prime Minister thought that he still should not have discussed such problems with the child because her reaction was unpredictable. Lillian, on the other hand, was at this point waiting to be praised for her brilliant idea and decided that Grandpa must be delighted. Usually when this girl had something on her mind, it was impossible to convince her otherwise. That was the case this time as well. Lillian was determined to solve the mystery of Boda Village's mithril business, no matter what. The young granddaughter of the Prime Minister promised to solve the problem for her grandfather and find out why the mining of mithril is shrouded in mystery. In the meantime, the mithril mining operations continued. Donovan recognized that the underground tunnel that had been created made it much easier to transport the mine door. Orem immediately appreciated how much time they were saving traveling time from MT, a bulker. And Sefer noticed that the tunnel would be free of monsters, so she could concentrate her energy on transporting the cargo. The straight road from Boda Village to MT, a bulker, was more than 50 kilometers. Hector had thoughtfully built 3 rest areas in the tunnel, and also made a special exit to the Green Dragon so that when he left Mount Abulker, he could deliver his portion of mithril ore to the mighty monster. Throughout the tunnel, every 500 meters were made ventilation holes leading underground, thanks to which the tunnel itself was always fresh air. Special luminous plants were planted on the walls of the tunnel to provide a source of natural light. But if light was not enough, torches could be used. Hector, as promised to the higher dwarves, was constantly delivering quality, strong alcohol to them. Albedo was incredibly happy with this cooperation, because thanks to this deal, he became the main supplier of mithril throughout the country. Of course, in organizing all the work was very hard, but after 2 months of hard work, decent results were seen. Once the band of adventurers along with Hector got out of the tunnel, the group decided to split up. The adventurers went to take the mithril ore to a secret underground vault, and the young lord thanked his friends for their labors and headed back to the village. But when Hector returned to the settlement, he noticed a strange carriage. The horse-drawn carriage clearly did not belong to the people of his village and looked more like a metropolitan means of transportation. After that, Hector still made his way home in hopes of resting. But as it turned out, the young lord was visited at home by a messenger from Viscount Avans from the neighboring territory. And apparently that strange carriage had brought this messenger home shortly before Hector's return. Rin explained that since the lord was not at home, they had sent the messenger to the house of the headman of Oji. Hector was surprised at the strange visit and immediately decided to read the letter. Avon's child is the steward of the neighboring territory, which also belongs to the Margrave of Glenrid. Hector didn't know the man at all and didn't remember you had ever received a letter from him before. It was therefore curious to know what he wanted. It was clear from the letter that Avans knows that this is the third son of the Margrave and congratulates him on the incredible development and prosperity of the village of Boda. He also expresses his desire to walk through the village with his daughter. As it turned out, the fact that Hector is a magician of the land has become widely publicized in the capital. But his father has not told anyone and probably is not going to tell anyone that he exiled his native son to the outskirts of the country. Hector realized that if Avance just wanted to observe the development of his village, he wouldn't have to come in person. And given their relationship with his father, it was obvious that Avance wanted to visit Bod's village secretly from him. Hector suggested that perhaps Avans had noticed some anomalies with the spread of mithril and linked them to the village of Pod, though no action was taken by his father in that direction. But if it does indeed turn out that Viscount Avans has followed Albedo's company and is therefore eager to visit, we can safely call this man a very clever and shrewd leader. But Hector was calm, for his secret underground vault would never be discovered by anyone, and so there would be no evidence. And so one must take this opportunity to get to know his neighbor better. Hector decided it was time to forge a new friendship and prepared a letter of invitation for Viscount Avans, indicating that he was eagerly awaited in the village of Boda. The letter was soon handed over to the messenger, who immediately set off on his return journey to deliver it to the Viscount as soon as possible. A few days later, an excited Rin ran into Hector's room and announced the arrival of a horse-drawn carriage with a cavalry detachment. Hector knew at once that it was the arrival of an invited neighboring Viscount. The young lord explained that a person of high rank had come to visit them and ordered that the gate be opened immediately and the carriage let in. The captain of the hunting party, Ed, using caution, waited for Hector's decision and only then opened the gate. Hector stepped out to meet the guests and introduced himself, and then welcomed them to the village of Boda. Judging by the expression on the faces of the carriage attendants, they were surprised at the massive walls and the serious gate protecting the settlement. The girl who first got out of the carriage was also marveling at the defenses. Hector thought she was the daughter of the Viscount he had mentioned in his letter. Guests stated that as for a small village on the outskirts of the country, this settlement has a rather impressive outer wall, which apparently does an excellent job of defending against monster raids. The surprised girl asked if Lord Hector himself had organized the construction of such a magnificent wall. Hector explained that his village of Boda was surrounded on three sides by an impenetrable, dangerous forest, and if it weren't for this wall, monsters could attack them at any time and threaten the locals. That was why building an outer wall was so necessary and was the first priority for the development of the settlement. The girl was fascinated by Hector's story and clarified whether he really was the local lord, for Hector looked too young. Hector confirmed that he was the manager of this village, so he could answer any questions. Lillian looked at the young lord suspiciously and clearly wanted to ask a lot of questions. Lillian realized that it was this young man who was the source of her beloved grandfather's worry. She remembered the words of Prime Minister Alfonso, who asked her to be very careful even though she was confident. Lillian mentally resented the innocent look of young Hector, who looked as if he had absolutely nothing to do with all the secret trade matters related to the distribution of mithril. The self-confident granddaughter of the Prime Minister decided to unravel the mystery and find out the true source of the huge amount of rare metal. Following the girl from the carriage came Viscount Avans himself, who advised Lillian to first introduce herself and be more polite too. Hector. Viscount Avans apologized for his daughter's rudeness and referred to the long journey that had slightly tired the young girl. Lillian instantly became more polite and friendly. Hector explained that his village could not be described as special, but he hoped that the time spent here would bring pleasure to Viscount Avans and his beautiful daughter. Avans was glad of the welcome and asked him to take care of them. But at that moment, the sentinel reported the approach of monsters. As it turned out, diamond wolves were rapidly approaching the settlement from the direction of the main road. Young Lord Hector ordered the main gate to be closed immediately and prepared to repel the attack. Lillian watched with interest while Hector meanwhile ordered Captain Ed to defend the settlement and command a squad of archers. After a few seconds, Captain Ed's loud voice ordered the diamond wolves to open fire. A deadly rain of arrows rained down from the city walls towards the monsters. The well-trained archers shot without missing, and this was to be the final stage in the diamond wolves' lives. Meanwhile, Viscount Avan's carriage had already crossed the frontier of the main gate, which instantly closed, creating an insurmountable border for the monsters. The excited Viscount Avans thanked the young Hector for his help, for if it had not been for his skillful actions, they might have found themselves in a difficult situation. At the same time, the dignitary confessed that he had not expected to see well-organized guards in the village. Hector explained that they were not guards, but merely a troop of local hunters. The young lord said that the hunters take turns on duty on top of the wall and protect the village from monsters. Just at that moment, Captain Ed reported to his lord about the complete destruction of the diamond wolves, which impressed the guests. Lillian was immediately interested in Ed's appearance and said that as a hunter he had too many weapons and armor. At the same time, the girl immediately determined that all of the hunter's equipment is made of mithril, and such armor is not all the royal guards, and it is very strange. Lillian apologized and opined that it seemed to her that the village of Boda did not have extensive financial resources to provide such expensive ammunition, and it must have been very difficult for Lord Hector to obtain it all. The young Earth Mage appreciated the girl's cunning and replied that it was indeed difficult to obtain such samples of weapons and armor, but everything worked out thanks to some arrangements. Hector realized that he had made a mistake and the hunter's equipment stood out a lot. And all he wanted to do was to put as much as he could into the defense of the village, but it turned out to be grossly overdone. Ed introduced himself to the guests as the captain of the hunting party and impressed the guests with his responsibility. But in fact, Ed understood the situation and decided to help Hector. The captain of the hunters said that not all the warriors of the village have armor made of mithril. And since there are many ferocious monsters in the forest, only the most skilled and warlike of the hunters were honored to receive such armor. Lillian couldn't find anything to reply to such a statement from Captain Ed. Hector immediately decided to change the subject and offered the guests some rest after the long trip and offered to give them a small tour of the village. Hector immediately stated that unfortunately there was no hotel in the village, but there were outdoor hot springs. The opportunity to bathe in the hot springs was very much appreciated by the guests as it seemed incredible, and the guests immediately asked to be taken to the warm water. Hector was glad that he was able to divert the guests' attention and mentally thanked Ed for his wonderful resourcefulness. After that, the guards, cavalry, and soldiers went to garrison the hunting party, and the guests decided to be accommodated at Hector's house. Lillian and Viscount Avans were amazed at the hot spring they saw and confessed that they had never dreamed of such a home. After all, it is wonderful to be able to take a hot bath in the open air. Avans praised Hector for such an improvement to the house, and Rin invited the guests to visit the hot spring whenever they wanted and promised to bring clean towels soon. At the same time, the maid informed the guests that they could also lock the back door while bathing so that they would not be afraid of sudden guests. This way of locking the door was something that Hector had specifically thought of to prevent surprise visits from Amanda and the rest of the adventurers. Rin then decided to get busy preparing dinner and invited the guests to contact her with any questions they might have. Lillian and Avans were pleased with the hospitality and thanked the maid for her care. Avans and Lillian took a very long. She folded herself with a hot spring, completely relaxed after the long trip. Then a wonderful dinner of the freshest produce, prepared according to Rin's special recipe, awaited them. While the guests dined, the maid had time to prepare the guest rooms, where Lillian and Avans went for their journey into the dream world. The next morning, after breakfast, Hector led a tour of the rest of the village where the guests had not yet been. Hector impressed the guests with the farmland where many different vegetables grew. Then there were long walks among the new and well-renovated buildings. After that, guests visited the store and met the cat girl who runs it. But after that, they took hot baths, had dinner, and went to bed. Suddenly, Lillian remembered her true purpose for coming to this village and decided that she couldn't just enjoy village life like that. After all, she originally had to find out the truth about the spread of the mithril. And she should already report to her grandfather about the first results of the investigation. But Rin's perfectly cooked breakfast once again took all of Lillian's attention away. The Prime Minister's granddaughter praised the maid for such a fine and delicious meal, and Rin in turn was pleased with the compliment. Over breakfast, Hector was visited by Amanda and the rest of the adventuring party and informed that they were out hunting for food. Lillian was interested in the unusual warriors and asked who they were. Hector explained that they were a squad of attack wings and they were the only adventurers in the village. Lillian was surprised because she thought that there should be many adventurers in this place since they are on the border and there are so many dangerous monsters. But if there are only 5 adventurers, it means they are real professionals and have high rank. It became obvious that the main defense of the settlement is a squad of hunters, and the adventurers are engaged in destroying high-ranked monsters, while Lillian was impressed that all the adventurers were girls. Suddenly, the Prime Minister's granddaughter expressed her desire to accompany the adventurers during the monster hunt, much to the puzzlement of both Hector and the attack wings. Viscount Avans stated that it was unthinkable for a girl of such status to ask for such a thing, and he would never allow Lillian to participate in such a dangerous event. But Lillian was persistent and promised her father that everything would be all right. The Prime Minister's granddaughter reminded him that she graduated from the School of Magic as the top student of her graduating class, and she is a magician specializing in water. But she can use high-rank magic freeze, and so she will be able to deal with monsters without much effort. Lillian decided that there was nothing else noteworthy in the village besides the hunter squad equipment, high walls and hot springs, and so it was time to pay attention to the world outside the village walls. To the curious girl, this opportunity to be with the adventure squad looked like an exciting adventure. But Hector decided to intervene in the situation and reduce the young lady's confidence a little. Hector advised to take the monsters more seriously because you should not underestimate dangerous opponents and real combat is very different from school classes. Lillian was not going to give up and reminded her that she would have 5 beautiful adventurers by her side at all times. The Prime Minister's granddaughter reminded her of her high-ranking magic again and said that there was nothing more reliable. Hector realized that Lillian was just a simple child who couldn't hear what he was being told. Hector thought that Lillian might be very talented to use high-rank magic, but she had been a pain in the ass lately. Hector hoped that the girl would calm down quickly if she could destroy a monster with her own hands. In the end, the young lord agreed to take the persistent Lillian on the hunt, but warned that he couldn't fully guarantee her safety, and so she'd better not go far. Hector promised the girl's worried father not to take Lillian to places of high danger. Advance in turn apologized for his daughter's behavior and explained that her occasional stubbornness was beyond explanation. To Hector's surprise, Rin was also going to go hunting. The maid explained that her presence would be useful in case anyone needed recovery magic. Hector agreed and thanked Rin for her foresight. After completing their preparations, the adventure squad, along with the beautiful granddaughter of the Prime Minister, Lillian, entered the dangerous forest. As usual, the scouting was handled by a small half-dwarf named Aurum. Hector asked Aurum to find the lowest-ranked daimonic beasts as soon as possible and lead them to the squad. The girl half-dwarf promised to do the right thing and thought at this moment that it was very hard work to babysit the daughter of an aristocrat who wanted to indulge her ego. After some time wandering through the forest, Aurum was able to spot a foul-smelling orc and decided that it would make a perfect specimen to hunt. The solution arose instantly and Aurum, with a precise stone throw, lured the fierce monster into her attention. Meanwhile, the rest of the troop enjoyed a peaceful walk through the forest and birdsong. Lillian, the Prime Minister's granddaughter, was in such a dense forest for the first time and enjoyed the pleasant smell and soothing environment. Amanda resented this atmosphere in the squadron, for the presence of the dignitaries only relaxed all the adventurers and everyone pretended as if they were on a pleasant and safe walk. But soon the calm atmosphere was replaced by concern, after everyone heard the approaching screams of Aurum. The half-dwarf girl was rapidly running towards her squad and reporting the approaching monsters. Aurum alerted the adventurer squad to the approach of 3D rank magical orcs. And indeed, after a few seconds, the furious and huge orcs that were incredibly fast for their size showed up in the distance. Aurum was indeed able to anger the monsters who were eager to take revenge on the insolent girl. Amanda finally waited for a familiar setting and ordered the entire squad to prepare for battle. But suddenly, the young granddaughter of the Prime Minister said that there was no need for the adventurers to interfere and she would handle everything herself. The adventurers were shocked by the young lady's act, but Lillian had already prepared to apply magic freeze. With a few hand movements, the Prime Minister's granddaughter activated the highest level water magic and created a violent stream of sizzling liquid, and then directed all the water in the direction of the enraged orcs. As soon as the stream of water swept over the three huge monsters, freezing magic was activated and the orcs instantly turned into blocks of glittering ice and no longer posed any danger. The young noblewoman did indeed have powerful magical abilities and decided to further impress her companions with other magic tricks. Lillian, thanks to her incredible magical abilities, was able to create a freezing wind that rained down on the frozen orcs and shattered the ice sculptures into millions of small shards. Such a magical performance greatly impressed the adventurers and young Lord Ector, who had not at all expected such power from the young noblewoman. Lillian was thrilled to see the first monsters destroyed in her life, for she was finally able to display her magical abilities in real combat. Ector admitted to himself that he thought this girl was a frivolous person who only moved thanks to her moods, but it turned out to be not so. In fact, Lillian showed the abilities of a real magician and defeated 3 ferocious orcs with just one spell. And now it is quite clear why this sweet girl was so confident in her abilities when she insisted so strongly on going into the forest. Ector sincerely praised the young noblewoman for her excellent work and said that since the hunt for demonic monsters was over, they could return to the village and rest. But Lillian did not expect to hear this at all and did not want to leave the dangerous forest so quickly, because she really enjoyed hunting dangerous monsters. At Prime Minister Alfonso's granddaughter exclaimed that she was only stretching herself and demanded to continue searching for dangerous monsters. After that, all the monsters that were unlucky enough to get in the way of the squad in the blink of an eye were frozen by the strongest magic of the young noblewoman, and the girl rejoiced at each of her victories. During the journey into the forest, Lillian seemed to have an endless supply of magical energy. It was hard to count how many times the young noblewoman had used freezing magic, and it was always a very effective tool against any monsters. Lillian was delighted by the number of monsters, because she had no idea that she could destroy so many opponents. At the same time, all the monsters seemed too simple to the girl. After repeatedly using strong magic, Lillian gradually turned into a crazy child who became obsessed with the thirst for destruction. Amanda warned of the danger, for excessive noise attracted other monsters that were much stronger, and so the squad had better return to the village. Aurum supported the commander and explained that if they stayed in the forest any longer, it would become too dangerous to return. Ector asked the young noblewoman to stop using magic and hurry back to the village as a powerful demonic beast was approaching them. But the enthusiastic Lillian declared that there was no such word for retreat in her vocabulary, and so she would defeat any monster. After all, it was not for nothing that she graduated as the best student of the year at the School of Magic, thanks to her incredible magical power. Such a thing Ector and the adventurers did not expect at all, and all realized that it would be very difficult to overpower this girl. The bold granddaughter of the Prime Minister did not hesitate to move forward to face the huge B-rank trolls. Lillian decided that if she could stop someone with her magic power, then she should seize the opportunity and show her full potential. The young aristocrat once again used magical freezing, but this time things didn't go according to plan. The huge troll was able to defend itself against the icy stream and knocked it aside with a powerful arm strike. Lillian didn't expect something like this and couldn't immediately believe that the monster managed to defend itself before she could cover it with ice. This turned out to be the first time her magic absolutely failed to work. Now the self-confident aristocrat felt panic, for the enraged troll was already rushing towards her. Fortunately for Lillian, the adventurous half-giant Nora came to her aid and was able to block the troll's attack with her powerful shield. The onslaught of the huge B-rank monster was enormous, and Nora ordered the young noblewoman to get away immediately. The rest of the attacking wings squad immediately came to the rescue. Amanda's lightning-fast sword strikes left no chance for the sluggish trolls. and Sephir inflicted irreparable damage on the monsters with her accurate shots and sharp arrows. Thanks to the intervention of the adventurers, Lillian was able to find herself safe. The battle was desperate but short-lived, for thanks to the marvelous mithril weapons, even huge monsters like trolls were stripped of their limbs with just one blow. The sorceress Doreen decided to put the final point in this battle. The girl used the strongest fire magic to create an explosion of colossal power. All the adventurers instantly decided to leave the epicenter of the explosion and run as far away from the fireball as possible. Once at a safe distance, Hector asked Lillian if she was alright, for she looked too excited and scared. The Prime Minister's granddaughter was breathing heavily, but replied that she was fine. Lillian apologized to Rin's maid for being a burden and thanked her for saving her. Rin asked the young noblewoman to calm down and offered to use recovery magic on her. Hector had also already calmed down a bit and was glad that everything had turned out well and no one was hurt. But suddenly something happened that no one expected. The excited Lillian took a few careless steps and didn't notice that behind her there was a hollow in the form of a steep cliff. Such carelessness was typical of small children, but alas, this time it could be fatal. Hector didn't have time to help the girl, but Rin, who was much closer, rushed to the aristocrat's aid without thinking of her own safety. The girls promptly flew down, and it was the worst thing Hector had experienced in his entire life. For he found himself completely powerless in such a terrible situation. Surfer noticed what happened to Lillian and Rin and rushed to help using her levitation ability. Thanks to the half-elf's intervention, the girls were surrounded by an air current, and it slowed their fall into the abyss. Rin and Lillian felt the effects of wind magic and realized that they would not perish now. An excited Hector praised Sephir for her timely intervention and help. But the half-elf girl explained that she could slow the fall, but she could not lift the girls back up the mountain, so they would have to be rescued by hand. Meanwhile, Aurum had discovered another problem and was quick to point it out to the young lord. Hector was already tired from today's ordeal and dreaded the new dangers. It turned out the girls were gently descending into tall trees with dense vegetation, and Aurum suggested that they might get stuck in them. It happened just as Aurum had suggested. Lillian felt the unpleasant landing on the thick branches of the trees. Still, she was glad that, thanks to Sephir's magic, she was lucky not to be crushed to death. After recovering a little, the young noblewoman realized that she was at the top of a very tall tree that was at least 10 meters high. And now it remained to figure out how she could get down safely. Lillian decided that all she had to do was simply climb down the branches and trunk, but it was not so easy. But at that moment, Rin called out to Lillian. The frightened maid gestured for the self-assured aristocrat to behave as quietly as possible. But Lillian didn't realize what was going on and wondered why Rin had such a frightened face. But after a moment, Lillian realized everything. The huge head of a horrible cyclops appeared in front of her. The most dangerous monster stared with a single eye at the young noblewoman, who felt a real terror. Rin panicked, but Hector was already rushing to her aid. There was too little time left, and the young lord decided to shorten the descent time and just jump down. Hector had time to ask Sephir to help him descend using levitation magic. Once at the bottom, Hector was ready to rush to Lillian's aid and fight the Cyclops. But the huge trash had already grabbed the girl and was holding her in his arms. The frightened noblewoman tried to use freezing magic, but the huge Cyclops did not react to such an attack and squeezed his hand even harder until the girl's bones cracked. At this moment, Hector pounced on the ferocious monster and tried to do something to hurt the vile Cyclops. The strongest blow of the adamantine blade was able to sever the arm of the huge monster and reduce the Cyclops' ability to resist. Meanwhile, thanks to Sephir's levitation, Rin came down from the tree, who was perfectly fine but only badly frightened. Hector stated that it was very dangerous and that we should get out of here as soon as possible, while the young lord asked to use recovery magic on Liliana. Lillian was unconscious and Rin rushed to give her medical attention, but Sephir ordered the maid to get away. The half-elf promised that she would take care of Lillian herself and tried to bring the noblewoman to her senses. Meanwhile, little Aurum decided to stop the fearsome Cyclops and used earth magic to lift a huge rock. The huge boulder slammed forcefully into the Cyclops, but the monster was able to block the brunt of the impact. After that, Amanda and Nora entered the battle and decided to take advantage of the monster's confusion. The combined attack of several adventurers managed to stun the Cyclops. Blade strikes alternated with hits of heavy stones, and Nora did not weaken the onslaught with her shield. With her strength and mithril weapons, the chief adventuress Amanda was able to cut off the leg of the huge Cyclops and deprived it of its ability to move. Even so, the monster was still very dangerous and was able to attack Nora. The hardest blow came from the shield, but Amanda was scared because of her team member. Amanda let her guard down for a moment and failed to notice the huge stone thrown by Cyclops approaching her. The huge boulder crashed down on the adventuress and shocked Hector. At that moment, the sorceress Doreen used explosive flame magic and unleashed deadly fire on the Cyclops. But as soon as the flame dissipated, everyone was horrified, for it did not do any harm to the monster and only angered it. The Cyclops, even losing a huge amount of blood, was still a formidable opponent, and no one knew how to stop such a fierce monster because all methods have already been tried. Hector ordered the entire team to disperse immediately as the huge Cyclops prepared to attack. The adventurer's reaction was instantaneous, and the monster's mighty blow landed in the ground. This time, it was little Aurum who rushed into the attack. The lightning-fast movement and strokes with the sharpest dagger left many slashing wounds on the huge body of the Cyclops. Aurum even managed to jump to the Cyclops' neck and left a bright red furrow on it. Sephir applied her wind blade skill, and after a few seconds, sharp discs sank into the Cyclops' body. Hector, with the help of earth magic and the earth ledges created, was able to reach as high as he could and deliver a few nasty blows to the Cyclops. Hector felt as he chopped off the monster's left arm, and it seemed too easy. It was thanks to the incomparable blade gifted by Master Donovan. Through this battle, Hector was able to feel the true superiority of the adamantine blade and was glad to hold such a weapon. The enraged Cyclops tried to attack the young lord, but Hector's magnificent blade severed the fingers on the monster's single hand. At that, Hector could not hold on and fell down, but thanks to the timely intervention of Sephir and the ability of levitation, the guy was able to land smoothly. The adventurers said that they would restrain the Cyclops and Hector would have to deliver the final blow to the monster's vital point. The young lord liked the plan and decided to strike directly at the throat. But before doing so, the adventurers launched a combined attack to stun the already wounded Cyclops. After the sorceress Doreen sent a fireball in the direction of the Cyclops, the adventurers signaled Hector to act. But at that moment, there was an unexpected return of Amanda, who still managed to get out from under the pile of rocks. The enraged adventuress declared that this damned Cyclops had taken the place of the main scum on her list, and then Amanda promised to destroy the monster with her own hands. In doing so, Amanda looked to be more like a demon, and even scared her entire team. Hector felt a surge of new strength with Amanda's appearance, and ordered everyone to attack together to finally destroy the cursed Cyclops. The adventurers responded to the young lord's call and were glad for the opportunity to get even with the monster. Hector was filled with determination and anger, and with no thought for his own safety pounced on the Cyclops with a firm desire to destroy it utterly. Lillian continued to remain unconscious, but Rin was still able to bring her to her senses with her recovery magic and asked her how she was feeling. The young noblewoman felt weak and asked how long she had been unconscious. But as it turned out, Liliana had missed the best part, and it was only now that she saw how huge the Cyclops that had attacked her was. The huge body of the dead monster was truly staggering in size, and the girl realized how much danger she was in. Lillian rejoiced that the adventurers were able to defeat the dangerous creature. And Hector asked if the noblewoman now realized how dangerous the monsters were in the forest near his village. Lillian then learned how difficult it was to fight such a Cyclops, even the entire team of adventurers. After all, even professionals like them, after combining their efforts, were able to deal with it with great difficulty, and so one should not take the dangerous forest lightly. Liliana realized that she had set impossible goals for herself because she knew only a few attack spells. But now she realized everything, and these were not lands in which one could walk around so carefree. The agitated noblewoman apologized to all the adventurers and to Hector, and then admitted that she was truly sorry for her reckless behavior. Hector asked the girl not to be upset, because in fact she was good, since she sincerely admitted her mistake, and the most important thing is that she is not badly hurt, because it could have been much more serious. Then the young lord said that it was becoming dangerous to stay in the forest, and it was time to return to the village. Rin offered to help Lillian on her return, and the girl gladly accepted, for she felt pain in her leg. The sorceress Doreen asked that would they not take even the body of the Cyclops with them. Hector agreed that it was a pity to leave it behind. After all, it was worth a lot. But it was clearly not worth wasting time now, and it was better to return to the village as soon as possible. The demonic monsters will take care of the Cyclops' body with their own methods. The adventurers were happy to return to the village, and immediately all wanted to take a hot bath. Meanwhile, the excited Viscount Avons was not finding a place in the village, as it had been a long time since the adventurers had left for the hunt. And naturally, he was very worried about his beloved daughter. But soon the long-awaited moment of return occurred. Liliana told her father about all the events that had happened in the forest and thanked Hector for the miraculous rescue. But the young lord of the village of Boda explained that he was not a savior at all, but was merely performing his duties as a chaperone of the beautiful guest. Viscount Avans then reminded Lillian that she wanted to tell Hector something very important. The excited noblewoman confessed that she was not only Avans's daughter, but also the granddaughter of the Prime Minister of the royal family. Such news stunned Hector and all the adventurers. After that, the girl cried and Avans tried to calm her down. Hector began to understand a lot because of the revealed truth and realized that he had attracted a lot of attention from the royal family. Rin busied herself with restoring the wounded Amanda to health. And in the evening after dinner, everyone took hot, relaxing baths. The very realization that Liliana turned out to be the granddaughter of Prime Minister Alfonso Grenville kept Hector uneasy. The young lord asked the girl why someone like her would want to come to such a remote village. Hector guessed, of course, that perhaps her purpose was to investigate the success of his village. Liliana explained that the rare material mithril had been spreading too much in the royal capital lately. So her grandfather had followed all the distribution routes of the metal, and they led to one single place in this village of Boda. And so she had to hide her real name in order to conduct a confidential investigation. And it was amazing to see a village that was thought to be abandoned in the entire kingdom rebuilt and surrounded by huge walls. The noblewoman also admitted that she was very impressed by the well-trained hunters who stand guard over the village, and yet they are all armed with mithril gear. And it was important for her as an explorer to find the secret source of the mithril, but it was never discovered. Hector actually knew that while they were hunting monsters, they had almost stumbled upon underground tunnels. And the young lord was glad that at that moment, Rin was able to distract the noblewoman in time, and then the entire team abruptly changed direction. After Lillian's story, Hector asked if he could hear more details from her regarding this metal story. The young noblewoman confessed that, in fact, after she had been rescued from the Cyclops, she wanted to call Hector herself for a private conversation. At the same time, Liliana promised that she would avoid at all costs situations that could harm this beautiful village. Liliana, then sworn to secrecy, asked Hector to tell her everything he knew about the secret spread of mithril metal throughout the kingdom. Such a statement came as a surprise to Hector, for he himself had wanted to know more information, but now it was being asked of him. Liliana explained that her grandfather, the Prime Minister, was aware of the secret dealings in the village, and that he had sent her here to find out the details. Hector realized that their cheating had already been noticed by high-ranking people, and so in the future they should urgently limit the sale of mithril and reduce the supply to the trader Albedo. Viscount Avance said that he is married to the Prime Minister's sixth daughter, and his personal estate is as powerful as his father-in-law's in terms of military might. But even so, he doesn't want to create an enemy for himself in the form of Boda Village, and so it is better to establish mutually beneficial relations and develop cooperation. Hector liked this proposal because he himself wanted to make some favorable deal with an influential person, especially a great chance to establish ties with the Prime Minister himself. Hector still decided to trust Avons and Lillian and promised to tell the whole truth. Meanwhile, in the dangerous forest, The crows pecking at the Cyclops' body were frightened by a terrible flying monster. The dragon's huge shadow hid the sunlight for a while and swept onward. After that, the terrifying dragon turned around and focused its attention on the huge body of the dead Cyclops, and then with the help of magical power devoured it. Having finished with the absorption of the dragon, felt a surge of strength and new knowledge, and now in the field of his attention was the village of Boda. With powerful wing beats, the dragon was gaining speed, and its fierce face was turned towards the village. The fire-breathing monster could cause irreparable damage to the villagers.